Okay, let's start our meetup. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are talking about the. Let me share my screen first. Just 1 minute. Okay. Okay, let's give a few the schedule. Okay, this week, today we are talking about the eventually we move, okay, from the ancient China to a little bit like medieval. Okay, so about the 10th century. Okay, so we talk about Neo-Confucianism and Neo-Taoism, and the next week. Pin is going to present or ask everyone to read the first chapter, the book 1 on the first part of book 1, okay, on the mentions. Okay, this one is very famous, and I already post on the web page, and please take a look. Let me show the. Okay, so the next week we're going to read the Mencius, which is a dialect, okay, between Mencius and the so-called King Hui of Liang, one of the most powerful feudal lord during the warring state. This one is very interesting, and that's why Pin selected this one, because when the feudal lord asked Mencius how to unite the country, and Mencius' answer is not the military answer, it's a moral answer. Okay, so compared to different places, different philosophers, it's very different. So that's interesting to read, and then it's more interesting than reading Confucius analog, because Confucius analog is very dry and just one sentence answer. So this one has a long argument. So it's interesting. And the following week, we are going to have the first Islamic philosopher, Dr. Shebi. It's going to, I'm working on this one, and then I believe he is coming to end of October. Okay, he's going to have our first introduction of Islamic philosophy. So thank you, Rubena. I don't know if she's here or not, but she's working on this one. So. Okay, so before we start, is any question or anything we want to mention? So before I start, I like to ask, is anybody read the paper and then want to share how do you think about the paper? Because it's important to me, because I kind of read this paper and I'm not sure, I've been hesitant for many weeks. I'm not sure I should ask people to read this one, because I'm not sure it's too difficult, or probably you will read, find out nonsense, or you find out it's meaningful, or how much you can understand, or you think it's easy. Is anybody want to share how do you think, or kind of summarize on this one?
Okay, Jason, I'm not going to summarize, but quickly, thank you very much for your input, because it was an academic paper and I didn't know half the people in there. I didn't know what periods they were from, but you actually gave me some timelines that I could understand what he was talking about. So thanks for adding that, because otherwise I would have been even more lost than I was.
So you think you can get it with some of my comment?
It made it, I had some understanding of what they were saying. Before that, it was just like
not totally blank, right? So right. Okay, great. Okay, so that's kind of I expect for a situation. Anybody have any comment on this one? How do you think this paper? You don't need, not necessarily summarize, or if you think you have a question, or you think you too difficult, too easy, or something like suggestion, that's the time to talk about this.
Yeah, I think I was also very because the whole paper is going back and forth between Taoism and Confucians, Neo-Confucianism, and I was actually thinking it would have been easier to understand if it was in Chinese for me to understand, because a lot of the words that it's in this paper is probably translated from the Chinese idea. And I think there might be some loss in translation. And so I don't know if there's a Chinese version of this paper.
I think the person, the author wrote it in English, okay, because that's an academic paper published in the Chinese philosophy. That's an English journal. So I believe he do it in English, and for the scholar, target on the scholar, okay, who already know the Chinese philosophy. I believe that's the case, but I'm not sure. So that's why I post this one, because I've been thinking about for a while how to introduce the later philosopher. Otherwise, we were stuck in the ancient time, and it sounds like, you know, after 2500, you know, after 500 BC, there's nothing happening, you know, after that. So that's the way I think that we can do it. Then I will see, you know, how much the interest level, and decide on the pace. So kind of like today, kind of like a test. So please raise your hand or ask question if someday you think I lost you, or you think, you know, you need more info, detail on about this. Yeah. No more. Okay. So I will assume, you know, you either read it or you read it and then not sure, you know, not very sure, you know, what's going on this paper. So let me show this one. So before we start, let's briefly overview the Chinese history, okay? Because I'm not sure, you know, everybody familiar with Chinese history or not, because everybody knows China has a very long history. So most of the time when we talk about Confucius, talk about Mencius, talk about Taoism, Zhuangzi, talk about Han Fei, Xunzi, okay, and we pretty soon we will also talk about Moism, and we already talk about Sun Tzu, okay, the legal, not legal, the military philosopher. Okay, they all happened during this time. Okay, that's I just roughly put it up around 500 to 300 BC. Okay, that's so-called the 100 schools of thought. They have many different kind of philosophers and different kind of idea. They argue each other. That's why we always introduce this area. So after around like 200 BC, the Qin dynasty, one of the feudal lords, united the China. He conquered the entire China. So he built, that's the first time China became a united country. So, but his dynasty only lasts for 15 years. So after that, okay, we got the long, about 400 years, the so-called Han dynasty. Okay, in Han dynasty, basically separate around, you can use around the central era, okay, the zero as the first century as the midpoint. So the first 200 years, we call it the Western Han. Then the other 200 years, we call the Eastern Han. Okay, the story is they have something happened during that time. But basically, we all consider the Han dynasty. That's a long time. That's why at the beginning, when Mark asked about why 92% of Chinese are Han people, yeah, that's because the Han dynasty is the first stable, long-lasting, united nation. So that's a Han dynasty. Even Qin is the first one, but it only lasts for 15 years. So that's the Han dynasty, that's for 400 years. 2 weeks ago, Pin talked about the oath of Redcliffe, okay, and that one we talk about the Romans of Three Kingdoms, the story of Three Kingdoms. That's the end of Han dynasty, because the country start to break into 3 different kingdoms. That's the story of the Romans of Three Kingdoms. That's a Wei, Shu, Wu, 3 basics. You have the 3 kingdoms, okay, during that time, and that time probably lasts for 50 years. And they have a very short united country, but turn out for the next, I would say, over 300 years, the China has never united for longest period of time. we call it Wei Jin period. Okay, that's in this paper. Okay, the scholar, the author keep talking about the Wei Jin Neo-Taoism. So he is mentioning this period of time. Okay, this is about 300 years, because during this time, China is not one country, it's many countries. And the history during this time is very complex, and it requires specialists to understand, because they have the north, they have the south, sometimes they have east, west, and the different foreigner invading, and that's a complex history. But on the philosophical side, we can generalize this kind of thinking is so-called 玄学, or so-called Neo-Taoism. Okay, we will talk about this one later. And after this, they have this very short period we call the Sui and the Tang. That's also famous dynasty. It lasts for about 300 years. That's the Tang dynasty. Okay, and during this time, you will know it's also the I think Islamic, okay, kingdom, okay, a Muslim kingdom also grow up during this time. So Tang dynasty have the context with the Westerns through the Arabian world. Okay, so because the Muslim empire start to going up, and during that time, the famous Buddhist philosopher scholar Xuan Zhang visit in India, and come back bring a lot of the Buddhism sutra, and that's the start of a lot of translation. And during this time, the Chinese language, in my opinion, Chinese language start to change, because the Chinese start to borrow a lot of Buddhism term, and the term has been used until today. So that's why I also consider Buddhism is also important, the Chinese philosophy. And many times we also introduce the Buddhism thinking during that. That's happened during around the 600 CE. Okay, so after Tang dynasty, then they will come with a period so-called the Song dynasty. That's a very famous dynasty. And Song dynasty also lasts for about 300-400 years, and then ended with the Genghis Khan's invasion, the Mongolian invasion, and basically China lost the country, being part of the Mongolian Empire, the super empire. Okay, so this one in China only lasts for 100 years and come with Ming Dynasty. So the author also put this one as a Song Ming period, or Song Ming Neo-Confucianism. Okay, it's a very general term. You can see the period is very long. It's about 600-700 years. Okay, and during this have the a discontinuity, okay, of the Yuan, so-called the Yuan dynasty, which is Mongolian occupation. So this long period of time, the author generalized as call it Song Ming Neo-Confucianism. And if you go a little bit detailed, they probably have a lot of things going on. But today, as we just do the general comparison, so we just generally call this period as a Song Ming area. And then after Ming, that's a Qing dynasty, and that's another 300 years, which is we can call it Manchurian, which is kind of close to Korean, and then at that time, it's not Han people. That's also considered foreign invasion. So the dynasty is very stable, unlike the Yuan dynasty, only lasts for 100 years. The Qing dynasty lasts for another 300 years. And you know the story. At the end, they have the Dr. Sun Yat-sen revolution. Then they have Mao Zedong. That's come to today. So that's the very brief. Okay, I call it the briefer history of the brief history of the Chinese brief Chinese history. So when you read the paper, you got the idea in your timeline. You have an idea, what's going on during this period of time. So, any question? Anybody want to? No question. Everybody fine with this one? So I think Pin talked about the history of the Chinese philosophy. I kind of like review it and then make another briefer version of the history of the Chinese philosophy. So let's make it kind of like a review. So if you, last slide, we see the history of Chinese history. And this slide, let's see what's the major philosophy going on in different period of time. So first, you will see in the so-called the spring and autumn warring state. That's about 500 to 200 BC. That's the so-called 100 school. And we know that most of the time, and even today, when the Western world, even in Asia, around the world, when you talk about Chinese philosophy, usually people will talk about Confucius, Mencius, Han Fei, Sun Tzu. They all in this time. Okay, so after the Han Dynasty, which about 200 BC to 200 AD, that time, if you have to put the philosophy thinking, that time use a very simple way to describe. Usually, it's naturalism, mystical, Confucianism. Okay, that's all this kind of thinking going on. That's during that time, and that's also during the time. I also picked the key philosopher to represent, and I cannot think about the person around this time. So I think Dong Zhongshu could be the one. He is the prime minister, and then he suggests the government unite the philosophical thinking. So he set up the school, and the school only teach Confucius teaching. And from that time to next 2,000 years, Confucius thinking become the orthodoxy teaching in Chinese. So next period is, remember in the history, after finished Han Dynasty, that's the Three Kingdoms, then that's the Wei Jin period. So basics, let's start with the Neo-Taoism. Okay, so a few people, Wang Bi, okay, who is the first commentator on the famous Lao Tzu's Dao De Jing. And they also have the 7 sages in the bamboo grove. That's the time, different thinking. I will have more information after the later, but that's the so-called Neo-Taoism. Then after Neo-Taoism, that's the Tang Dynasty, which is Buddhism coming, Xuanzang. I just have randomly picked one. So after Tang, that's the Song Dynasty. Song Dynasty basics, we call the in the this paper, the author called the Neo-Confucianism. But if you want to go a little bit detail, okay, the Song Dynasty is called the School of the Principle, so-called lixue. Okay, talking about the principle. Okay, so what is principle? We will deal with this one later. Okay, there's a lot of famous scholars during the time. Zhu Xi, Zhang Zai, Lu Jiuyuan, Zhou Dunyi, Lu Jiuyuan. There's a lot. Okay, during this time. Okay, and after Mongolian occupation, then they come with the Ming Dynasty. Then the Neo-Confucianism continue. But the Neo-Confucianism has a little bit different than the Song period time. That's the Ming period time, which is so-called School of Heart and Mind. And I believe that has a strong influence from Buddhism teaching. So start to teach, go look at your heart, start to talk about your consciousness. So that's the time. So that's the general, very, very brief idea about the history of the Chinese philosophy. So all I talking about this should be set down on the background of today's reading. Okay, so any question, any comment about this? It's quiet, okay? Okay, so let me quickly introduce some books. So that's also sitting in the background. I probably will spend a little bit more time talking about the background of today's reading, because that requires some understanding on the background. So that will help your reading. So I think this book, we just have to quickly know what is, and then just ask question if you have no idea what's the book talk about, and then please ask question. So some important book, okay. that's during the time is Yi Jing. Okay, so Yi Jing, I think a few months ago we talked about this one, the Yi Jing, and there's a different translation. Somebody called Yi Jing or Book of Change. Okay, so and another one is Dao De Jing. That's by the different spelling, Dao De Jing, or still with D, and then somebody just call it Lao Zi is the author, and there's also different spelling. You just have to know all this one means the same person. And another Taoist writing is Zhuangzi. Okay, that's come about 200 after Lao Zi. I think we already read one of the article, and then when we have a chance, we can introduce more. Then come with more important book, so-called 4 books, and because in the Neo-Confucianism, the scholar Zhu Xi recommend, okay, and become the government standard. It's like a 4 textbook, okay. So first is the Analects from Confucius' teaching, Mencius, okay, from Mencius' teaching. So these 2 is most important. Then they have like 2 other book, much shorter, which is the chapter from Lixue, I think, okay, from the book called Lixue. So basics, the book of the so-called Greek learning. I think Pin also introduced this one, and the doctrine of Min. So these 4 books become the orthodoxical teaching for the Confucians. So you can see Chinese philosophy being going from the 100 school of thought and to the Han Dynasty become like a Confucianism as orthodoxy, and to the Song Dynasty on the government standard, reduced to 4 books, that's the 4 orthodoxy book. Okay, Analects, Mencius, the Great Learning, and the Doctrine of the Min. So that's become like a 4 standard textbook after that. So that's about the book. So I'm going to go over all this philosophy just quickly, and then if you, I just to provide this one for the people to review what it is. Okay, so please ask question if you don't see, don't understand, or if you have any situation. Any comment? Okay, so let's move on. So let's quickly do this one, and for the next few slides, I just want to give everyone a quick review, see what all this book about, and I have no intention to go detail or too much. So basics, I will assume you will understand by look at this slide. Basics, so-called hexagram, and they have there's a different yin and the yang, and then put together become that's the Yi Jing, that's the book, okay, of Yi Jing. So I think we introduced this one before, and just kind of review on what is Yi Jing. That's a book, talk about all these 64 hexagram, and they have the mystical interpretation, moral interpretation, metaphysical interpretation, and if you are interested, we can go over. Have a special meetup talk about this one. Okay, so that's the book they have, okay, during that time. And during the Han Dynasty, start to develop more on the so-called naturalism. So they have the theory of yin yang. I think everybody see this symbol. Okay, that's this kind of concept. Probably start earlier, okay, than Han, but in Han, they start to spend more time, or more scholars start to talk about this, and the so-called 5 element. Okay, so the wood, fire, earth, metal, and the water. So this line basically means they can grow each other, right? Water will grow wood. Wood will grow from water. Fire will wood can generate fire. Fire, after fire extinction, they have earth. During the earth, inside the earth, you can find the metal, and the metal melted become water, and the water will nurture the wood, okay, and wood will become fire, and that's the way to grow. And each one will kill each other. So water will extinguish fire, fire will melt metal, metal can cut the wood, wood will or wood will block the earth. Okay, the earth can block the water, so they have like generate each other and they kill each other. So that's become a basic mystical, or you want to call it the metaphysical theory behind the scene. So this one start to get the popular, systemized during the Han Dynasty, and all the scholars know all this. And the Chinese medicine, a lot of things also based on this metaphysical thinking. Okay, yin and yang, and the 5 elements, and all put together one. They generally help each other. They kill each other. They, so that's the series behind the scene. That's happened during the Han series. So, question? Any comment? Any question?
Yeah, quick comment. I remember last time we talked about the 5 elements. There were some confusion about Earth. So I just want to clarify, Earth is more in the context of soil, not Earth as an entire planet.
Yeah, that's because it's more on the soil. If you think about Earth as the globe, then that's totally going. So soil would be more proper term on the translation. Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Well, so, I can excuse the idea of fire creating Earth. I mean, you have the energy in the stars. We know that now. We know that the energy of the stars created Earth. We know that energy and matter are interchangeable cosmically. So there is a modern relationship there. But this metal to water, have there been any, that's inexcusable. So is there kind of like, it's true, you can have liquid metal and you can have liquid water, and of course they're practically the same thing, and but they're not. They're completely different, constituted completely differently chemically. So how do we excuse this mistake? Have there been any papers kind of like trying to expose the weak links of the yin yang philosophy in the 5 elements?
I don't see that.
I think here water just more represent the liquid state of matter. A lot of ancient Chinese is descriptive and conceptual. So water just means things that are fluid.
But anything else doesn't help wood. It's only water that helps wood. So the chain is broken either way you look at it. There's kind of like, in other words, from a modern perspective, since we know that there's no relationship between metals in the atomic series and metals as they were even called at the time, probably of lixue, there's most likely no relationship here other than the state of matter, and the state of matter doesn't hold because metal doesn't interact with water except to contain it, and water water interacts with wood, but uranium or some other kind of metal would not necessarily interact with wood in that state, in that kind of way.
Yeah, James. Okay, yeah. That's the scientific explanation, but the Chinese talk about the basics is talk about the face or representative, the idea of metal. So yes, it's not sustainable by today's point of view, but I just have to, today's point of view is just present what is if you want to argue on the scientific point of view, actually it's not sustainable. I 100% agree, but that's what happened during the Han Dynasty. And
I like these old philosophies, but I would sort of like create a separation there.
Oh yeah, we can all.
They were partly right, but there's a separation right here. Yeah.
So basically, it's that's what at the time people thinking, and I will not say they are stupid to not know, the metal, the water generated from the metal is a different liquid than the liquid used for drinking. I believe they understand that, but you have to, in Chinese philosophy, have very different. Chinese always think about try to uniform and make everything unite together. So actually, unlike more on the Western, more on the critical side, okay, it's like think about, in some cases, one doesn't work, but especially the ancient Chinese more intent to think about how to make it work instead of a question why, or in some case, it doesn't work. So I think that's the reason behind that.
Yes, and one comment.
Yeah, please.
So if you see the old ancient Indian scriptures, like which is like 5,000 years old, the same thing is mentioned in a different way. 5 elements. They say fire.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Fire, yeah, air. So like air, earth and fire and water are there, but two elements which are different.
Yeah, there's no
air,
no
space.
air. Yeah.
Space and air.
Yeah, air and the space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also Greek also have 4 elements. Okay. And if we add the ether, that's another one. So it's not, I think I have a slide, many months ago, we compare Indian, Greek and Chinese together. Okay. So hold on. Okay. We have a lot of hands up and I don't have the intention to have further discuss on this one because it's controversial, and another thing is just like James talked about, it cannot sustain. Okay, it cannot sustain.
Can I just say something real quick?
Who Pin? Okay, please.
Yeah, I mean James is correct, of course.
Oh yeah, of course.
I just want to clarify once and for all. We're talking about philosophy, not science. I mean, I think it's quite obvious when you try to categorize the universe into 5 elements. Or 5 whatever is not, it's not science. So
okay,
we can move on from this. This 5 elements also, it's because we shouldn't overemphasize it even as a philosophy.
Yeah, basically I want to say that's it. Okay, so that's the 5 elements. Okay.
It is not worth that much discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to quickly show in case somebody don't know, what's 5 elements. Okay, so that's it. So lower your hand if you are not, you want to talk of this one. Okay, so I have a few people hands up. Okay, so I don't have an intention to discuss too much on this, but I would suggest ask question. Okay, Rubena, you are the only one qualified to ask question. Okay, go ahead.
Just the slide before the I Ching or I Ching,
yes.
Is that like part of the Chinese astrology? Like
you can say this one partially, yes. Okay.
Like
I believe the original purpose is for the predict what's going on. So a lot of time, that's I believe the original people use this one to. For example, I'm going to the war. Okay, so you try to do it and then figure out, it's good to go to the war or not go to the war. Okay, so should I do something? Should I promote A, B, C? Which one should become my prime minister? I probably do this one to figure out. So I think that's the understanding is correct. But they also have metaphysical meaning. They also have the moral teaching on that. That's the people add on later. So that's the quick answer to you. Yeah. Claudia, please.
Yes, this diagram you currently have on display, I believe it pertains to the Book of Changes, right? So it has some has metaphysical elements, it appears, right? About, I guess, some type of ultimate reality about life.
Yes.
So I'm guessing in relation to Confucianism, the traditional Confucianism, not Neo-Confucianism, I believe did not really embrace the metaphysical realm. I don't think it entailed the Book of Changes, correct? Although Confucius was interested in the Book of Changes, it wasn't really part of his teachings, was it? So I'm wondering, because according to this reading, the assigned reading, it appears that Neo-Confucianism and Neo-Taoism, the kind of like, and then some kind of a collaboration, and Neo-Confucianism is becoming kind of more metaphysical. So did Neo-Confucianism embrace the Book of Changes, was it part of their philosophy or not?
Thank you, Claudia. You know, I'm very happy you asked this question. That means I posted the right paper. Okay, that's exactly the question I want people to ask. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. Okay, you read the paper and then I think you read it correctly. Okay, thank you so much. I'm very happy on this question. I would say Confucius is not totally reject I Ching, because if you read today's I Ching, they have the Confucius comment on that. And the Confucius also said, after you turn 50s, then you can start to study I Ching. So in other words, I Ching is so difficult, only for the people over 50 years old should study. So that's the part. And the Confucius really said that he didn't interested to talk about the afterword, talk about God, talk about ghost. That's true. But the Neo-Confucians start to try to combine, okay, the I Ching as a metaphysical background for the Confucius theory. Okay, that's the paper we are going to discuss later. So just a summary, quick summary like this. Thank you for asking this question. Okay, we have James, Pin, and Mark. Okay, James, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the I Ching. It seems to me that it is a metaphysical, system of some sort, because it's based on the idea of change, right? A change, and also on being. So it's, if you are familiar with some philosophies, these are the basic questions about the ultimate principles of the universe is based upon the idea of change and permanence, and the idea of one and the many. Yeah. And it incorporates the yin and yang, right? The polarity of opposites, operating in and so I think that's why maybe Confucius, some of the major philosophers are interested in relying on I Ching as a kind of a foundation for their, social philosophy, that it is a kind of a metaphysics understanding of oneself in relation to the universe, to nature.
Yeah, thank you, James. I think I agree, and then that's in my opinion that's correct. And then it reminds me about the name of I Ching. People sometimes change as Book of Change, and actually it's not proper, right? Because I in Chinese probably have 3 meanings. It means change. It means permanent. Okay. It also means easy. Okay. So I Ching basics not just talking about change. You talk about change, talk about being, and then talk about easy. Okay. The ease. Okay. And Pin, Mark, and Madeline. Pin, please.
Yes, I just want to follow up on Claudio's excellent question, because it points to a very, very common misconception that I Ching is not part of Confucianism. It absolutely is. I Ching is one of the 5 basically sacred books of Confucianism right from the start. Confucius loved I Ching. Another quote from him is, if heaven is willing to give me a few more years, I would spend those years studying I Ching. Yeah. And also, Confucianists claim that all the 10 annotations of I Ching were written by Confucius himself. Whether that's true or not is besides the matter, is that this is how much they revered this book. So I Ching is an essential part of Confucianism, and in fact, probably almost all the schools of thought in the ancient times did revere I Ching. So it's kind of the grandmother of Chinese philosophy, if you will.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Who is next? Okay, Mark and Madeline. Mark, please.
Yeah. Were there any? Actually, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
The first one is: were there any schools of ancient Chinese philosophy that rejected the I Ching that you know of?
Well, okay, that's my opinion. Okay, Chinese philosophers usually are not interested to reject something. Okay, I can think about people like Xunzi. Okay, that's one of the Confucian scholar who, if you just quick remind, who believe human nature is dead. Okay, so his writing, he usually reject the heaven. Okay, he's not saying reject heaven. He just said the message from the heaven, it doesn't count. Okay, everything is on you. Okay, I think that's the way. And the Moism, I don't see he talk about I Ching at all. Okay, at least I don't read this part. Even he believe divine, he believe ghost. Okay, I talk about Moism, Mozi. Okay, the other first. So I don't see anybody strongly say, okay, I Ching is wrong. Okay, so we don't see that. You know, doesn't mean it's all correct though. So just have to say that. Madeline, please.
Yes, I appreciate that you're just reviewing in the early part of the session things we've discussed before at various meetups, the different elements, the trigrams, things like that. So we're kind of going through the basic concepts we've discussed before, and then we're going to talk about the paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that's why I don't want to last too long. I just want to make sure everybody in the same page.
Yeah. So let's not all get stuck on the details of each individual, because this is just the prelude.
Yeah. So basically, I want people to ask questions, not say your opinion. Okay, please. Okay. So I want to make sure everybody understand. I don't want you going forward and feel like, okay. So Rubina, please.
I was just curious, how much of these quotes that King or you talk about that Confucius has said is really, he has said it or has been added much later? Is there any way to know if he really said that, if he would study I Ching for the rest of his life, or was it someone else who came later and added?
Okay, Pin, can you have a quick answer to Rubina?
It is written later by his students or students of his students, but it's fairly reliable, as far as these things go, right? Something 2,000 years, more 2,500 years ago. It's not like the fortune cookies. Okay, so in the West, there's a lot of sayings like Confucius said this, Confucius said that. I think more than 90% of them Confucius never said. But the quotes that Jason and I have referenced are directly from the Book of Analects, which are written by his students, or most of them by his students' students. So at least, not too far off in history from his own time.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, you have the last question about I Ching.
Oh, yeah. Actually, my question wasn't about I Ching. We'll just skip me for now. Why don't you just move on? Okay,
thank you. Let's move on. Okay, next 4 section, okay, is also preview, but a little bit more important. So basics, I'm going to talk about Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism, Taoism, and Neo-Taoism. Okay, and I find out, of course, it's very difficult to define, but I find out the Wikipedia with some alteration, I think pretty much capture the idea. So let's give a quick lesson, okay, for this 4 school: Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism, Taoism, Neo-Taoism. I get a quick review so we can move to the paper. The paper is not long, but if we have this one clear, I think it should be easy to understand the paper. And
Jason, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Alex says her raise hand function disappeared. Did you accidentally block her, or maybe she can use another symbol to when Alex, she wants to speak?
You cannot raise hand?
I'm sorry. I think I just found it.
Okay, great. Okay, no problem. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Confucianism. Okay, based on I copy this one and modify from Wikipedia.
What are you gonna make? I don't know yet. Nice selection.
Okay. Can you mute yourself or somebody? Let me mute. Okay, Confucianism. Okay, so Confucian developed from, we know that from the Confucius time, and Okay, I think this sentence is important. The worldly concern of Confucianism rests on the belief that human beings are fundamentally good. This one is not necessarily true, because Xunzi, okay, believes human nature is bad. Okay, so but basically they all agree is humans are teachable, improvable, and perfectible. I think the perfectible is important because Confucius asks people to pursue perfection. Okay, so that's very key difference, and especially through self-cultivation, self-creation. Confucian thought focused on the cultivation of virtue in the moral organized world. That means the foundation is a morally organized world. The society, the basic assumption is the society is a hierarchical society, organized society. So everything is working in this way. And they have the many key virtual teaching, okay? Ren, which is benevolence, humaneness. Okay, we're not going to talk too much detail on this one. I just give an idea. We have a whole section talk about Ren, and still have a lot of people complain or say like still don't understand what's the meaning of Ren. Okay, so we run another section talk about. And E, that's another big section we can talk about: duty, righteousness, and upholding the righteousness for the moral disposition to do good. And the D, that's also important: ritual, etiquette, okay, a system of ritual norm to proprietary to done. Okay, so basic. And wisdom, I think that's the only part people have no problem to tell what's good, what's bad. And the xiao, that's another concept. I do have a plan to have a section talk about xiao. I think it's in Confucius, the second book, talking about xiao, which is filial piety, filial obedience, and that's not all correct translation. It's a little bit different. So I think if you read the book 2, the second book of Confucius Analect, most of the Analect, the book 2 is talking about the concept of xiao. So that's about quick, like 2 minutes review on the Confucians. Okay, that's the basic teaching. Okay, let's move on to the Neo-Confucianism. And the key is let's know a little bit different, the subtle difference, okay, between Confucius and the Neo-Confucius. Okay. So Neo-Confucian, I also copy from Wikipedia. I think it's pretty good. So Neo-Confucianism, okay, there's a different name. Okay, so if you read other paper article, sometimes they call 宋明理学, okay, that's L, okay, 理学, okay, or sometimes shortened as 理学, Lixue, okay, that means the school of principle. This Li is not this Li, okay, and this Li, that's different, okay. This Li means principle, and the other Confucius teaching, Li means etiquette, ritual, okay, so that's a school of principle, okay. It's moral, ethical, metaphysical Chinese philosophy influenced by Confucianism, okay, because it became prominent during the Song and the Ming Dynasty under the name, under the formulation of Zhu Xi, okay. So basics, that's the quick definition of what's the Confucianism. Neo-Confucianism have been an attempt to create a moral rationalist and a secular form of Confucianism by rejecting superstitious and the mystical elements of Taoism and Buddhism that influenced Confucius during the Han Dynasty. So basics, we can see this movement is a rationalism movement, okay, for the Confucianism. Okay, so the basics on the Confucian teaching, and then the idea is to reject the superstition, okay, and the mystical element of Taoism and the Buddhism. Okay, so but the turnout, okay, when you read the paper, you will start to realize even they reject the Buddhism and the Taoism, but turn out they accept a lot of Buddhism thinking and the Taoism thinking. So I hope the purpose of here is not to go too deep on the Neo-Confucianism, the purpose here is I expect everyone read from the previous slide and this slide, get the sense of the difference between Neo-Confucianism and the Confucianism. Okay, that's a little bit different, a little bit like when we talk about Platoism, okay, Plato and the Neo-Platoism, okay. So that's the subtle difference. And another way to look at the Neo-Confucianism is think about Thomas Aquinas, okay. He put the metaphysical background, or he used the Aristotelian philosophy with the to interpret Christian teach. Okay, so that's kind of movement happening during the 10th century. We have a question from Alex.
Yeah, I was in another class, meetup about Confucianism, and in the beginning, if we go back to the last slide that you have, these 5 principles that Confucians talk about do not explain the human spirit. And I believe that from the other lecture that I attended was that in order to sustain Confucianism, and times are changing, people are becoming more and more self-aware of their spirituality. And in order for Confucianism to really incorporate into the society, as well as for people to make it more popular, and so actually that's why they started to try to find a way to incorporate Taoism into Confucianism, so that to sustain the philosophy, because one of the biggest defect of Confucianism is that it does not provide any spiritual reasons or principles of the inner self. And I think either they start to realize this, they have to overcome this deficiency and start taking the Taoist and to incorporate the Taoist principles, because otherwise, people are starting to wonder about the spirituality and that, just the old Confucianism was not able to explain that.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. It's pretty good summary. And Pin, please.
Actually, Alex raised a very interesting point. I would differ a little bit. I would say that's why Mencius was very important. It's regarded as maybe the person that really made Confucianism last 4,000 years. And this cross-pollination, as I was reading the essay between Taoism and Confucianism, I think really started from earlier, much earlier, from Mencius, who is a couple of hundred years after, only a couple of hundred years after Confucius. That during this time of the 100 schools, they all had to debate each other, okay, so that's just some thoughts. But originally, I raised my hand to say that, as so often, the irony of life and history is, here you say that this is create a more rationalist and secular form of Confucianism. I would say the irony is that because of the efforts of some of the prominent Neo-Confucianists like Zhu Xi, they were really the people that made Confucianism into a state-sponsored theology. And so there's the other side of that, it did not their efforts did not make Confucianism more secular. Actually, they made it more into a state-sponsored religion that try to control the thoughts of the masses for 1,000 years after. And another thing is that they, as you pointed out, they were inspired a lot by Taoism and Buddhism, and then they turned around and attacked those two schools. That's my personal dislike for for Neo-Confucianism.
That's the social the influence of that. That's another subject we should discuss next time. Today we just want to focus on the philosophy on it. The philosophy may not be bad, but so I agree with Pin. The social impact, okay, and the result is very, well, in my opinion, in Pin and I's opinion, we hate it. So, but you know, let's look at the philosophy.
But I do agree. There's a lot of great things about the philosophy. The philosophy is good.
We have to
more
look at
the after effect.
Yeah, the after effect is a different story. Okay, so let's look at what's the movement going on. Yeah. So, Mark, please.
Yeah, hi, Peter. So Tang brought up actually something relevant to what I was going to ask before. So maybe it's pertinent. So I was just wondering if somebody wanted to give, like, this might be difficult because it's difficult in European history too, but kind of a succinct dividing line between ancient Chinese philosophy and religion. Like, how would you distinguish the two? Like in texts that I've seen in the United States, a lot of times Confucianism and Taoism are listed as religions. But, you know, now we're talking about it in philosophy. But I know you have the same problem to a certain extent in the ancient world, in the Mediterranean as well. But I'm wondering, how would you guys make that distinction, like when you use those terms, philosophy or religion?
Okay, Mark, thank you for asking this question. You know, it's a big question, and then I just have a quick answer on that. I think it's because first is I think the reason is the way of the Chinese reading the text, okay, or philosophy, the attitude. Chinese scholar read as a revelation, okay, not as a philosophy. Okay, so basically try to understand what the ancient text talking about, not critical or criticize what the ancient. I think that's the reason being put in the theology instead of philosophy. Okay, that's my personal understanding. But the fact is, most of the school, university, put the Chinese philosophy in theology, okay, not in philosophy school. So that's the fact. Yeah. Or what's the reason? We can discuss later. So let's finish up. Pin, you have something about this?
You're on mute. You're mute.
No?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add real quick. At the same time, it's hard to also classify these ancient Chinese philosophies as religion, because there's little talk about, well, it really depends on what, you know, the question of what is religion. So if you say religion is a school of thought that emphasizes what happens in the afterlife and who created the world, then the ancient Chinese philosophies typically do not have an emphasis on those two aspects. They may touch on that here and there, but they're not really central themes. So I in a way, I think religion or philosophy are artificial distinctions that we create in more modern times, right? I think we just need to look at these things and study them as what they are and not try too hard to categorize them.
Okay, let's put this question on the side and we have to move on. So I quickly show this one. That's the famous scholar called Zhou Dunyi. Okay, he probably, I'm not sure he's the first one or nothing, but he famously, he started to put together, okay, as a Confucian scholar, okay, try to put the, you can see this one, he put the yin yang, okay, and put the 5 elements, and then put all together and try to explain, give the metaphysical reasoning or background for the Confucian's moral teaching. Okay, that's his effort to try to do. Okay, so that I just want to show. I'm not going to go detail on this one. You can see this one. That's the 5 element. Okay, he put, and this one is yin and yang. Okay, so he put all together. And here's another picture. And I don't want to go to too much detail on this one. Here's another drawing about like yin and the yang, and become like 4 elements and all through. So that's he is doing during that time about the 10th century. Okay, so we're done with the difference between Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism. Okay, sometimes we call it lixue or called the Xinxue, okay, or Songmin. That's what we're talking about. So I assume. Okay, let's move on. So next 2 slides, I'm going to talk about the Taoism and the Neo-Taoism. Okay, again, the purpose is not too much your own opinion about Taoism, Neo-Taoism, but basically we would like to know is the difference between Taoism and the Neo-Taoism. So they will make, when we read the paper, will make more sense when we read the paper. So again, I copy from the Wikipedia. So basics, it talk about Tao, is talking about the way, the Chinese Tao, the different spelling, the way, Tao with D or T, somebody spell as Taoism with T, someone still as D with Taoism, they all the same, okay. And then in my slide, I use the old style, use T as Taoism. Sometimes I don't include the parentheses, you just have to know we are talking about the same thing. The major teaching is about the Tao, about the virtue, okay, or talk about so-called wu wei, or no action, okay. So we don't want to talk too much on this one, but basics, that's the teaching in the Taoism teaching. And another Taoism important is the Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is 200 years after Lao Tzu, and he write a lot of story. I think Pin also introduced one of them, and we are going to go more about the Zhuangzi's writing. So basics, that's the Taoism teaching. Okay. So anybody, I just assume you, I think Taoism probably most of people understand what's Taoism. So let's move on. So what is Neo-Taoism? Okay. Neo-Taoism happened during the Wei-Jian period of time. So that's about 200 CE to about 500 CE during this period of time. Okay. So this one, I like to spend a little bit more time on that because this period of time and this philosophy, I think, in my opinion, usually being underestimated and being misrepresented, okay, for the most of a scholar in China, Asian, and around the world, okay. So let me read the definition from Wikipedia. Okay, the name, okay, I prefer the name called Neo-Taoism, okay, or Neo-Taoism with T or D, but a lot of paper, okay, call it the Xuanxue, okay, so they call it, usually most popular name is Xuanxue. The word Xuan means mystical or profound, okay, so I don't like this name because it's easily to mislead to the religious Taoism, mislead to the something mystical, okay? So I like to focus on the metaphysical and the social aspect on the Neo-Taoism. So let me read. The Xuanxue is a metaphysical post-classical Chinese philosophy from Wei-Jin period, okay? Bring together Taoism, Confucian belief through revision and the discussion, okay? So they realize, and the difference of during this time, they have a lot of debate. They discuss, okay? So they kind of like disagree each other. They try to figure out the deeper meaning, okay, of the ancient text. Xuanxue come to reign supreme in cultural circle. It's not just the scholar writing, it's a social movement, okay? So I think they are, this one is my own opinion. I think they have the 3 key points during this, the Neo-Taoism. Basically, it's liberated from the social norms, okay? So these people, they are scholars, they are kind of aristocracy. So I would consider them as aristocratic rebel, okay, or intellectual rebel. They kind of like against the social norm, okay, and they promote liberty. They promote the individualism. Okay, so that's the very unique situation happened in Chinese philosophy period of time. And in general, I talk about in general in the textbook, okay, or most of people will consider this one is not so good movement because these people are individualism. They being associated with selfish. And the reason they have this one, they kind of like, because during this period of time, the country is not united. There's a lot of war, okay, a lot of corruption in the government. So Confucians criticize for this kind of movement is they are selfish and they are not to their social responsible. So they kind of like only enjoy yourself and not care about the government, not care about the society. So being considered as bad example. But I think, okay, Neo-Taoism is one of a unique movement because that's probably the only time in China or Chinese history have the movement about the liberty, freedom, individualism, and that's been ignored for 1,000 years. So that's my own opinion. But basics I would like to everyone to take is the difference between Taoism and the Neo-Taoism. Okay, so the Neo-Taoism kind of like go deep to what the ancient texts talking about and bring it to the social level and kind of like perform in the individual level. So that's it's not pure academic and not associated with government. It's more on the social movement, but only in the cultural circle, not in the regular people. So that's I have to talk about for this Taoism and the Neo-Taoism. So any question, any comment before we move on to the real text? It's not that long, it's simple, but the background is a little bit difficult. That's why I would prefer to spend more time on the background talking and then go to the main point of the paper. No question, no comment? Okay.
People have their hands up.
Do anybody have hands up? Oh, sorry.
Alex and Madeline.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see it. Okay, Alex and the Mandarin. Alex, please.
Yeah, just a quick comment. So basically the Taoism and Neo-Taoism, the biggest difference is that I think from what you said, Taoism is more about the world and how the world affects, the society, the people, and how people should kind of internalize through spirituality. And then the Neo-Taoism becomes more almost like more common, more easier for people to understand about themselves and their relationship to what's happening around them. Let's say, if your loved one, all of a sudden something bad happens or something is, they will use Taoism, Neo-Taoism to try to explain what happens in their lives. And then they would use Confucianism or Neo-Confucianism when it comes to business or when it comes to how to react, how to behave with others, such as your parents, the relationship part. So I think, is that correct, my understanding?
Well, I think well, that's my comment to you. I think your comment is more on the difference between Confucianism and Taoism, but the difference between Taoism and Neo-Taoism is more on the Taoism kind of. That's what I think. Okay, I'm not thinking about who is correct because it's a very deep question. Okay, but because my personal preference and my personal reading, I will see Neo-Taoism is systemize the Taoism teaching, okay, put in the whole system and bring up the a dialectical method. Okay, because the big difference during this Neo-Taoism time is they have a lot of debate among the scholars. Okay, so they kind of set up like today's debate game. They have a certain format, certain way to debate. Okay, but the funny thing is the way they debate is not just like the language. They talk about language. They talk about the clothes you wear, the gesture you use. Okay, the tone you use. They're also important. Okay, so that's an interesting time because during that time, you know, people, the scholar doesn't see there's a good potential to work for government. They are rich. They have nothing to do, so they spend a lot of time discussing the Taoism, and they try to bring Confucian together. Okay, so that's my opinion. But you know, I'm not saying who is right, who is wrong. But basically, that's I think about this one. I should have a few sections talk about Neo-Taoism because I think that's a very interesting subject. Madeline, please.
Yes.
Just a very quick technical issue that I have. There's this moving tree image on my screen that's totally distracting to me. So if we can ask Mark to turn off the camera, that'd be great.
Who turn off?
I think Mark is walking and the trees are shaking on my screen.
Okay, so
really
okay, hold on. I'm going to mute all. Okay, now. Okay, so Madeline, please. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, it's a quick question. If you could go back a couple of slides to the one with Zhou Danyi.
Zhou Danyi.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Danyi, sorry. Yes. The red circle, is that representing the void or some sort of metaphysical Buddhist concept of transcendent illumination?
No, but I'm not going to answer this question now because I don't know. and this
Okay.
randomly pick up to show how you do it. I have no interest, or at least for today, I'm not going into the detail. Yeah, thank you for paying attention. James, I think James is the next one, right? James.
Listen, yeah, I missed the part where you talked about individualism. Was that did you say it was an offshoot of Neo-Taoism?
Okay, so yes, okay, individualism. I think that's based on my personal reading. Okay, if you kind of look in the Wikipedia, they probably not talking about this part, but I think that they put more on the individual style. I think the paper is talking about he called it a personage. Okay, so basically you want to build your own personal style. All right, so and they start to recognize the individual. Okay, but the individualism probably different in today's view of individualism. That individualism probably means inside the cultural group. Okay, the aristocrat. Okay, not the common people. Okay. I don't see they go to the common people talk about, yes, Mr. blah blah blah, you are individual, blah blah. I don't think it's this way, but within their circle, they focus on individual and the free. Okay. Pin and
because I was associating that with going back to Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi was a kind of
yes. You're associated with Zhuangzi. That's right. Very correct. Thank you. Pin, please.
Yes, inspired by a couple of the questions, the one we just heard, and Alex, I just want to maybe make an attempt to answer them a different way. So with Alex's question, Taoism, Lao Tzu founded what generally regarded as the founder of Taoism. So Lao Tzu's book still talked a lot about society, what he envisioned the perfect society should be and how a leader should be. So he still had a lot of concern for society and leadership. Whereas Zhuangzi basically completely just focused on individualism, individual, personal, spiritual liberation. So the Neo-Taoists are basically inherent and extension, in my opinion, mainly focused on Zhuangzi's school of Taoism. on individual liberation. So that's kind of the difference there, or the evolution. Now regarding Madeline's question, can we go back to that slide of Zhou Dunyi?
The circle, okay?
Yeah, I believe the circle represents Wu Ji, because in Yi Jin says Wu Ji gave birth to Tai Ji, Tai Ji gave birth to Liang Yi, the yin and yang. So Wu Ji literally translation means without bound, or without, Ji means either bound or extremes. So without bound, and then Tai Ji means, or in English we say Tai Chi. Tai Ji means the greatest bound. So that's the greatest extent. And then so Yi Jin said Wu Ji, the without bound gave birth to the greatest bound. And the greatest bound gave birth to yin and yang, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a lot to talk about, yeah, because that's from Wu Ji to Tai Ji, Tai Ji to two becomes four. Yeah, so that's a key point. Yeah, here's a chart on that. So that's not today's subject, but basically we just want to let everybody know they start to work on, that's the area, okay, the Neo-Confucians is start to working on. So Fred, please.
I'm wondering that we set up originally Taoism and Confucianism as an exclusionary choice, as sort of a, not polar opposites, but to be distinguished from each other. Neo-Taoism seems to wed these together in some sense. So I'm wondering whether it is possible, or was it the practice, a common practice, to actually adopt both of those, Taoism in terms of an exploration of an individual metaphysical exploration, and Confucianism as a more of a public-facing social regulatory system. I mean, in the same way that, for example, Buddhism can be adopted as a methodology in conjunction with another religion or belief system, rather than in opposition to it. Can it, or was it practical to adopt Taoism as an individual methodology while retaining Confucianism or Neo-Confucianism as a more public-facing way of behavior?
Thank you for your question, but that's the common answer is Chinese and all so-called eclecticism, right? So basics, just like I think Alex talked about it, in the working day, you are Confucianism. In the weekend, you are Taoism. When you are successful in the business, you try to be the Confucianism as possible. When you retire, you become the Taoism. Okay, so I think that's the so Chinese are not so on the distinguish between schools used to combine together. And during this one, this few slides, you probably see, okay, the Neo-Taoism movement is try to include Confucianism, and the Neo-Confucianism and try to include Neo-Taoism, and then even they said they want to reject Buddhism, reject the Neo-Taoism, but turn out some of them also bring in. If you look at the later part of Neo-Confucianism, they have a lot of Buddhism flavor inside. So that's a complex question, but basics, that's the difference. Yeah, Pins, please.
Yeah, great question. Very perceptive. I totally agree with Jason's answer. I just want to emphasize, the Chinese are both, I think exactly, we assimilate, both schools are equally influential in people's thinking. And the same, even if you pick the prominent Neo-Confucianists or the Neo-Confucianist statesmen, you read their creative literature, they celebrate Taoism, and they, in their personal lives, they totally adopt, the Taoist philosophy is embedded in their thinking and views of life and whatnot. So I'm basically repeating what Jason said.
Okay, great. Let's move on the real paper. Okay, but I think that's within my plan with the 15 minutes today, so it's not too bad. So, okay, so this paper, within talking about all the background, is anybody want to talk about this paper? As a starting, okay, like you read this one. How do you think about this paper? Right now, you have some background on that, and then anybody want to just give a quick review or quick opinion about this paper? No? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so basically this paper talking about, let's I summarize, and then I make sure it's, so I think right now, I assume, okay, right now the paper should become very clear what the paper talking about. So first, he put a 3 point. Okay, basically the author tried to set up is Neo-Confucianism inherit a lot from Neo-Taoism. Okay, so he lists 3 different themes, and the third one has the 3 point. Okay, that's I try to summarize, make it simple. It may not be 100% correct, but that's another. So first theme they are common is both are focused, are talking about the intrinsic logic of the life world, spiritual world, and the personality idea. Okay, so that's the both Neo-Confucianism and Neo-Taoism are doing the same thing, because Neo-Confucianism learn from Neo-Taoism, but they have some difference. Second point, they start to talking about the idea of body, mind, and the nature and the principle, which is being studied to mention during the Neo-Taoism movement. And after about 1,000 years later, 500 years later, the Song Dynasty, the Neo-Confucians start to use the same way, talk about the body, mind, and the nature and the principle, this kind of dualism, and with a different way. So that's the second point. Number 3, I think that's important. Basics, Neo-Confucianism, okay, start to use the method, the way of textual interpretation used by Neo-Taoism, okay, to do the following 3 things. First, they start to do some philosophical argument, okay, instead of just the commentary of the ancient text. They start go deeper to the philosophical argument to go to deeper meaning. Okay, I'm talking about pure on the scholar point of view. Okay, that's the first point. Second, they start to develop the new idea from the ancient text. So, for example, principle. Okay, so like new ideas like nature. Okay, which is human nature, emotion. Oh, sorry, misspell. Emotion. Okay, and the principle, inner sagehood. All these terms are not mentioned or not focused in the ancient text, but they start to develop the new idea from the ancient text. Number 3, both Neo-Confucianism continue from Neo-Taoism. They bring the I Ching, okay, to the table. They put I Ching as a metaphysical background for their theory. Okay, so that's the author try to set up, for the movement. So basics on the paper, on the surface, look like Neo-Confucianism is rejecting Neo-Taoism. But in the author's opinion, the Neo-Confucianism try to do actually is inherit what Neo-Taoism has been done, okay, 500 years ago, and then bring it back to the Neo-Confucianism teaching. Okay, so I think that's the author try to set up on this paper. So any comment, any question, any opinion on that? Right now we are in the main dish, okay, yeah. But you can have more idea. If you read the paper, or you disagree with what I summarize, that's great to bring up. But that's that's what I read from this paper. Claudia, please.
Yes. Do you have any idea what brought about these changes? Was it the political environment?
Yeah.
Was it a war, or what?
Yes. Okay. That's not today's subject. Just give you a quick answer that they want to make China great again. Okay. So the long story is Song Dynasty. If you know, actually Song Dynasty is not a united China. Just Chinese claim it's united. But if you look at the map, Song Dynasty only a very small territory in China. At that time, the Chinese land world is very international. They have the China on the north, they have at that time so-called Qidan, okay, then become the Manchurian, then become Mongolian. On the west, so-called Xixia, okay, that's another group, okay. So basically, they have the three major kingdom, okay, fighting together or cooperate together. So that's a very, and then culture-wise, the Buddhism become popular. So during that time, they have a lot of movement. So they try to think about the culture. So that's another long history. And then if you look at the time, the Neo-Confucianism is about 600, 700 years. Okay, so I'm just quickly summarize this 600 years. But in the Western Europe history, you can see how long of his 600 years. You can put like 100 people between these 600. So it's difficult to summarize just one sentence. But what I'm saying, trying to do is just get a quick but not so accurate review on that. All right. Thank you for your question. We have Madeline and TC and Jim. Okay, Madeline, please.
Yes, my question is based on the paper.
Okay, please.
I see here on this slide we're looking at internal sagehood. It seemed that the paper talked about two different, we all have a sort of idiosyncratic inner voice as well as cultural norms that we follow. And the paper seemed to be talking about two sort of idealized versions of this. One was the Neo-Taoist, who would be the somewhat of an individualist with a spiritual bent, and the Neo-Confucianist would be more of the sage in terms of being a ruler and interacting with other people. Do I have that? Do I have that approximately right?
I think you summarized very well. And my question to you is, why didn't you summarize at the beginning?
Oh, I don't know.
Yes, you know so much, and you are not. Okay, well, thank you very much. For sharing. So I can skip for the next two slides. Thank you. Next one is TC, please.
Hi. So can you expound on, because in each point logic is used, and I suppose my understanding of logic is Venn diagrams and Cartesian mechanistic thinking. And so it seems, mutually exclusive, say, from personality ideal. It seems like it's much more causal. So can you expound on exactly what the term logic means?
Well, I probably cannot explain now, because it's difficult. I just can have to say the logic, when we say logic, probably means rationality, okay? And then some people may know, I've been working on the Taoism, the Tao Te Ching translation with the 52 live ideas on every Tuesday. I get involved in the so-called logic, Chinese logic. It's very different than when you talk about non-contradiction, sufficient reason, syllogism, deduction, reduction. That's all different. Okay, that's the only thing I have to say. But sorry, I cannot go further. But I just have to say that's different. Okay, if you want to put a general, that's called rationality. Okay, rationalism. Okay, so you just think, okay, and through argument. So, James?
Sorry, I think I took an American history course, and they sort of, I think in the American history, the world history course, they said that this was kind of like the Neo-Confucianism was kind of forced by the influence of Christianity, and then later Buddhism, I suppose. And I'm sort of like, I didn't read the article, unfortunately, but I just wanted to try this out as a question. You know, is this sort of like a rejection of these religious tendencies and the development, a sort of a strengthening of the traditional arguments for the Chinese behaviors and native ideologies, such as the Confucian school and the Taoist school?
Yeah, I think that's correct. That in a way it's correct, but I just have to rephrase it. The starting point is try to reject the Buddhism. Okay, that's very famous from the Han Yu. Okay, he write the essays to reject Buddhism. Okay, he want to go back to original Confucianism. Okay, that's very correct. But how much influence on that? Then for the next 600 years, actually, in my opinion, they probably accept more Buddhism than reject Buddhism. Okay, but I'm talking about the Buddhism is talking about the philosophical part of Buddhism, not talking about religious part of Buddhism. So that's it's complex, and we need to further discuss to make it clear. So today we just want to I think today's purpose is we want people attend today have the idea of Neo-Confucianism, Neo-Taoism, and they are different. Some are different, some are similar. Okay, so you got your own idea. So, okay, so I'm going to next few slides. I'm going to the detail on each one. Okay, so so first talk about the first point. Talk about the personalized style. Okay, I think Madeline mentioned about the personal idea. So basically to the personalized, so you will see the different way to look at. In the Neo-Taoism, they are looking at in the Wei Jin, they talk about personage, okay. Some translation will call it the celebrity, okay. So basically that's in the cultural circle, okay. They value the meaning and the value of individual existence, attach great importance to the ascension of people's inner spiritual realm, pursues an elegant and carefree personal lifestyle. I think that's important. They want to live an elegant and carefree personal lifestyle, transcending the distinction of things. Okay, so basically they focus on the extend on the individuality, highly praising freedom and enjoying life. Okay, so that's their personal style. Okay, so that's in the Taoism. If you compare to what Neo-Confucianism, they inherit what Neo-Taoism is teaching about the individualized personage. Okay, Neo-Confucian doing instead of a carefree or enjoy life, they put the moral and the social sense on that. So Neo-Confucianism scholars pursue a sage-like way of behavior that is free and serene. Okay, so that time they start to teach the ancient sage. They start to teach everybody can be the sage. Okay, so everybody, as long as you work. So the famous talking is Sun, Yao, and the Sun. If you remember in the ancient text when Confucius teaching, keep talking about highly praised Yao and the Sun as an ancient sage, as the role model, as the best we can do. So during this time, Neo-Confucian, okay, start to learn from Neo-Taoism, individualized. They talk about, yes, Yao and Sun, they even the ancient sage, they are people, they are not God. So same as me. So as long as I work hard, I work in the right way, I can be like them. So that time they start to have so-called sage-like way of behavior. So, and this way, so everybody can be the sage. Okay, so that's the different movement for the Confucianism. Claudia, please.
Yes, this focus on individualism on both sides, Neo-Confucianism and Neo-Taoism. Does that imply that the traditional forms for both, they were, let's say, were they dogmatic, hierarchical, and organized? Is that what it's implying?
Well, my answer is no. I think probably I misrepresent or the paper is misrepresented. Okay, so I probably need to further explain on the individualism. Okay, so this individualism is not today's individualism. Probably it doesn't mean you are going to change the social structure. That means you are working on your individual training. Okay, not talking about individual right, like I can do this, I can do this. Okay, especially in the Confucian, Neo-Confucian, they talk about individual training, give individual the potential to become the sage. Okay, and again, instead, when you become a sage or you train yourself, focus on individual. Unlike in the Western world, with the individual started claim some right, like I can have freedom of doing this. They are not doing this. Okay, Confucius start to talk about, then I have the social responsibility. Okay, I have to do this. So that's a key difference. If I have to make it, I hope I answer your question or it makes sense to you for Claudia. That makes sense?
Yeah, you explained it. I understand it better now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's a lot of things, very easy to misunderstand it. If you didn't ask question, I would not even know, they have this kind of misunderstanding. Thank you for the question, for that give me to clarify. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first point that also want to talk about. If you want to memorize, to get the essence of that, so both are talking about individual person, but in the Neo-Taoism, more talk about carefree lifestyle, elegant for the individual. And that's why the Neo-Taoism has a potential to shake the social structure, but it didn't go this way. And then in the Neo-Confucianism, they talk about individual trading, but it brings to the not individual right, but it brings to the individual social responsibility. Okay. To that. Okay, so you will see the later writing about the Neo-Confucian. They kind of treat themselves, okay, as sage king. So they have the responsible for all the people. So second point is my heart issue. Okay, so this my heart issue not being clearly mentioned in the ancient texts. Okay, so there's two kinds of dualism. One is my body issue. Okay, another is nature principle issue. Okay, so first, I think in the author's idea, both Neo-Taoism and the Neo-Confucianism are doing the same thing. Okay, on the mind, body, and the nature principle point of view. I think my body issue, I think is not foreign for most of the people. If we know Descartes, my body dualism. Okay, so basics we can say they are similar. So basics, the teaching is body, mind, and the nature principle, two things. Okay, so Neo-Taoism appeal to our inherent nature, confirm the rationality of all desire and the emotion in order to achieve peaceful spirit and the leisure body. So basic Neo-Taoism is use rationality, Okay, basic idea is the nature, your human nature should control your emotion. Okay, so Neo-Confucianism take a further step from that. Okay, instead of just control your body, he's talking about enlarging heart. Okay, that's just kind of answer to what Claudia's question, because in enlarging heart means your heart is not only for yourself. You start to have the social responsibility. Okay, as you have been a Confucian scholar. Okay. So that's the my body issue. Okay, Neo-Taoism and the Neo-Confucianism deal with, during this period of time. And after my body, they start to deal with nature and the principle. Nature is, this issue is very similar to in the Western world about your soul and God, or in the Hindu philosophy is your individual soul, the Atma with Brahman. Okay, so basically talk about the nature is your body, your personal soul, and the heaven. Okay, which is, instead of talking heaven, they start to talk about the principle. So that's the relationship they are trying to build in the during this period of time. So in author's point of view, both Taoism and Neo-Taoism and Neo-Confucianism are dealing the same thing, during this time. Yeah, James, please.
Yeah, you're saying that in the Chinese philosophy, even up to this point, there is no dualism, right? Of the way that Western has this kind of dualism of the mind and body, right? Because even in the language itself, the mind and heart are always, connected. There's no difference between the two, right?
Yeah, thank you, James. That's an issue. Yeah, that's a issue. Subtle difference. Probably I need to explain a little bit. First, my heart. Okay, in Chinese, my heart. Chinese use heart, use mind to think. Use heart to think, not use mind. So, basis during this time, Chinese are not talking about mind. They talk about heart. So when you see heart, basics is mind. So I think here what the language I use mind, but the actual word is heart. Okay, not mind. So when I say body, mind, okay, actually in the original Chinese is body and heart. Okay, so thank you to mention this one. And second thing also important is dualism. The concept of dualism is very different from the Western world of dualism. I think it's more similar to Hindus dualism. Okay. The difference is when Western world talk about dualism, we are talking about dichotomy. Okay, so mind, body are separate. Okay, when we talk about God, our soul and the God are separate. They have the creation, they have the creator. They are totally separate. But in Chinese, I believe, same as in Hindus, when we talk about dualism, we are not talking about separate. We talk about unite. Okay, so my body, we talk about the mind control body. Okay, when we talk about the nature and the principle, or talk about individual and the heaven, we talk about we will connect together, we unite together. So the concept of dualism is very different in the Eastern world and the Western world. Okay, so I think that's the thing we need to pay a little bit attention on this. Madeline, please.
Thank you, Jason. This is very beautiful and healing philosophy, especially for our times. What I'm thinking of is just this past Tuesday evening in the Tao Te Ching meetup on 52 Living Ideas. I think that we got to a chapter in the Tao that someone was talking about. I think Aman was talking about as being how to apply it in life and in society, and that we were kind of moving into a phase of the Tao Te Ching that dealt with that. I wasn't as focused in that group as I usually am, so I may have misinterpreted it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a different concept of the what is that? My dualism. Okay, so we can have a further discuss on this one, but today we just make sure we understand they have the difference. Okay, so 3 points of the method of the text interpretation. Okay, so I will consider first. Let me quickly move this one, then we can summarize for the the discussion. So the author put a 3 point on the text interpretation. First, that's I just summarized with one sentence. They talks about rationalism movement. Basically, try to use instead of reject the Han Dynasty, okay, commentary tradition. Okay, that's the Neo-Taoism is doing. They reject the Han Dynasty's commentary tradition. They use the philosophical connotation of class and classics and their own philosophical view. In other words, they start to put their philosophical view to the ancient text. And they have the argument of speech and idea, and they bring it to the higher level of the philosophical speculation on substance and the function. So that's what the Neo-Taoism is doing, and the same way Neo-Confucianism start to work in the same way. They give their own philosophical idea instead of just put the commentary. That's a new method. So Pin and I before we talk about how bad, how terrible of the Neo-Confucianism movement to the social on the social side, because after that the Chinese society become extremely conservative. But in another view, the method of their interpretation is very advanced. Okay, basically what they are doing is they start to put their own idea to the ancient text, give the different meaning on that. So I can see that's a great movement, just like Western Enlightenment. But unfortunately, it doesn't go to the Western way. In China, it go to the other way, become ultra conservative. Okay, why going this way? That's another question we can discuss. But if you pure look at the philosophical on the scholar point, forget about the social impact. This kind of movement is very similar to the Western movement of the Enlightenment. People start to put your new idea, use the ancient text to interpret you with your own philosophical idea on that. So that's the first point the author want to point out. Second one, after you're doing this one, they have the new idea come out. Okay, here I focus on the analects. So the concept of the nature, which is a human tendency. Okay, the heavenly principle, instead of talking about heaven, they talk about heavenly principle. So kind of combine heaven and the Taoism's Tao together. They start talking about your nature can control your emotion. Okay, so this idea has been kind of mentioned, but not very clear in the ancient text, especially in the Confucius Analects. But during this time, start to bring out. So that's another new concept coming out during this period of time. So that's the second thing come out from the Neo-Confucianism. Joe, please.
Actually, can you expand upon as to why it became conservative versus more enlightening? Just a little bit on that.
Okay, yeah, I can make a quick comment on that. One important thing is the government, because Confucius tradition, all the scholars, only way to become a scholar, the reason to become a scholar, to study, is work for government. So all these people, this great philosophers, work for government. And you all know China has a long history of the testing system. Okay, so they start to put all this great teaching in the test. So kind of like I invented a great teaching, then I force everybody to learn my great lesson for next 1,000 years. Okay, then that's and put in the practice. So that means they make a big progress, but they stop there for the next 1,000 years and even get narrower and narrower. So I think that's the problem. So the problem of the sacrifice for the widow, okay, praise the virgin, okay. So I think even the Western world also praised the virgin, but the problem of the Chinese virgin is different because you are not virgin, you are in sin. Okay, so that's all kind of this kind of situations start to happen. So I think that's another a problem there. To quickly to answer your question, Alex.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the Neo-Confucianism, even though they try to take Taoism, try to into the Neo-Confucianism, but I feel that this part, like the internal stagehood, the emotions, Neo-Taoism is still putting, this is not their main emphasis. There's still emphasis on social structures, on respecting your king and respecting your parents, and that your emotions, I think from what I'm reading, for Neo-Confucianism is still taking a backseat. It's that like for them is the social relationship is more important than your personal emotions. Am I correct?
I think in general it's correct because it's difficult to say it's correct or not correct. Remember what we are dealing now is 600 years of philosophy, right? So if you think of in the Western world, if you put the 600 years in any period of time, you can see how many things, how different happening. So I'm quickly generalize the 600 years philosophy teaching here. So any statement is correct. Any statement I can find the way to argue against. So that's the thing I talk unless it's totally wrong. So I think that's in general I agree. And a lot of focus on like when your father or mother die, you have to mourn for 3 years, and the later on become like if you have the kids was born between the 2nd year and the 4th year of your parents die, you are in trouble. You have to send to jail. That means you have sex during these 3 years. So a lot of things happen during this time. So there's a good impact and a bad impact. Really depend on how are you going to look at this one. So I would like to quickly finish the last part. Okay, so make sure I finish the paper. Okay, Madeline, please.
Yes, well, I don't want to hold things up. So if this is going to hold things up, don't answer my question. The second bullet point, exploring the meanings of nature and heavenly principle. So what is meant by nature here? It controls emotions and so that would be nature in us, or us as a manifestation of nature, and then nature outside of us, sort of in the self and other category, is a human character and has metaphysical transcendence.
I'm not sure how to answer this one in the short way, and I'm not sure I have a correct answer. Let's put in the discussion on later on, but basically, let's move on for the, I think. Okay, the last part is simple. Okay, basically is both because Neo-Taoism start to put the I Ching to the picture. Okay, and series take I Ching to combine with the Taoism teaching, and so basically I consider that they give the I Ching a different interpretation. They also call it the rationalistic theoretical interpretation of I Ching. I think that's the right word. Okay, during that time. Okay, so they start to, instead of thinking about like astrology, okay, they start to more seriously talk about, remember the I Ching have, how many? Have 64, each one have 6. So that's a 384, different line, okay, so-called Yao. So they have the cultural group, okay, they discussion, okay, each one by each one for every day. Okay, so they try to figure out, just like 52 living ideas, they want to discuss one hexagram, okay, once a day for 64 days, and each one to discuss, debate. Okay, so that's the way they start to, dive deep on the ancient texts. And the same as Neo-Confucianism. Okay, so they do the, so finally they talk about the, I think we can end up here. So both Neo-Confucianism and the Neo-Taoism using I Ching as their metaphysical background. Okay, so that's conclude. Okay, today basics. I think we finished the paper. Okay, except the last word they call the 孔颜乐处, so-called seeking a sage-like mind and the happiness of Confucius and Yan Hui. Okay, Yan Hui is Confucius' the best student. He's so poor, died early at 32 years old, but they claim Confucius and Yan Hui are happy. So important message here. Let me conclude one more slide on this one. Because that's the last word. So make sure nobody will complain I didn't finish this paper. So the last word talk about the Chinese word 孔颜乐处. Okay, let's talk about happiness. The Neo-Confucian's happiness. Okay, this Confucius style and the Yan Hui style, based on the Confucius analogs. Okay, the word is the happiness of Confucius. In his eager, that this one is talking about Confucius because the student, okay, describe what kind of person of Confucius. Okay, so that's the thing. As a Neo-Confucian, you need to learn. Okay, so he means Confucius. In his eager pursuit of knowledge, he forgets his food. In the happiness of its attainment, he forgets his sorrows. And he does not perceive that old age is coming on. So he enjoy study, and forget that he already turning old. So that's kind of happiness of Confucius. Okay. The happiness of Yan Hui, Confucius' best student, with a bowl of rice and a cup of drink, and living in his mean, narrow street. That's Yan Hui. Okay. While others could find it unendurably depression, to Hui's happiness it make no difference at all. Okay, so this kind of happiness is the kind of happiness they are looking for. So let's conclude for today's meeting, and then I hope it's not too boring and everybody learn something, and then. Question, comment?
Definitely a lot to study. It sounds very interesting period in Chinese philosophy.
I think like a good student like James, I suggest you to read the paper.
Yeah, the paper.
I think if after today's section, if you pay attention, the best way is read the paper one more time. I think this paper is pretty good. In my opinion, it's pretty good. Good summary.
Jason, you posted,
sorry, PC, I cannot hear you.
Paper, I thought they were basically just